Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to dig into a really critical issue that honestly, quietly undermines the entire real estate industry. The unethical tactics some agents use to get ahead. And these aren't just, small mistakes. These are moves that can completely shatter a consumer's trust and stain the whole profession. Let's break it all down.
So let's kick things off with an analogy from the source material that just perfectly frames the problem. Picture this. You hire a contractor, and the very first thing they do is start trashing the person who worked on your house before. I mean, that's a huge red flag, right? You'd immediately start wondering, why are you so focused on them instead of showing me how good you are?
And that right there is the million-dollar question we're looking at. Because while that behavior would make you raise an eyebrow in pretty much any other business, it has somehow become weirdly common in real estate. So let's get into why this is happening and what it really means for everyone involved.
Okay, so where does a problem like this actually come from? It's easy to just write it off as a few bad apples, but the issue goes so much deeper than that. It's really about how these actions create this fundamental crack in the very foundation of trust that the whole industry is built on.
And this is where the real damage is done. Every single time an agent cuts a corner, it's not just some isolated thing affecting one client. No, it adds to this bigger, growing perception problem that chips away at the public's trust in all agents. And that's a risk the industry just can't afford.
All right, so now let's crack open what the source calls the unethical playbook and really look at the specific tactics some agents use when their goal isn't serving clients anymore, but just winning, no matter the cost. What does that actually look like day to day?
The first and, let's be honest, most common play is what the article calls the low-hanging fruit of bad behavior, just trashing other agents. It's such a clear sign of insecurity, not confidence. I mean, think about it. If the only way you can build yourself up is by tearing someone else down, what does that really say about the value you bring to the table?
Yeah, this really lays it out perfectly, doesn't it? The contrast between a real pro and someone who's just insecure. A confident agent, they let their track record and their skills do the talking. When you ask them, why should I hire you? They tell you what makes them great, not what makes their competitor bad. All right, next up we have a really sneaky one that the source calls buying the listing. It's this subtle but incredibly damaging bait and switch. This happens when an agent knowingly tells a seller their home is worth way more than it is, just to get them to sign on the dotted line. The goal isn't to help the client, it's just to get their sign in the yard. So to lock down that listing, an agent might throw out a number, say an extra $50,000, maybe more, than what all the market data actually supports. And for a seller, of course that's tempting, but it's a promise built on nothing, designed to hit your emotions, not your logic.
But, of course, that dream price, well, it turns into a nightmare pretty fast. The reality is a house that just sits there on the market. That forces the seller to go through painful price cuts, they lose valuable time, and worst of all, the trust they had in the agent who promised them the moon is just gone.
Wow, this quote just nails it, doesn't it? And it brings us right to our next unethical tactic, misrepresentation. We're talking everything from misleading photos to, creative wording. It is a surefire way to absolutely destroy trust and maybe even get you into legal hot water. The bottom line is, honesty isn't just the best policy, it's just plain smart business.
Okay, now we're getting into a really tough category of behaviors. These are the actions that are all driven by a massive conflict of interest. This is what happens when an agent's advice is shaped more by the size of their commission check than by what's actually best for their client.
And a classic example of this is something called steering. This is when an agent pushes a client toward or away from a certain property because of their own financial gain or their own biases, not because of what the client said they wanted. It is a total violation of their most basic duty to put the client first. Period.
Then there's dual agency. Now this is where one agent is playing for both teams, representing the buyer and the seller. It's often legal, but man, is it an ethical minefield. The real problem is when agents don't have a totally upfront conversation about what that means, and instead just bury the disclosure in a huge stack of paperwork.
And that kind of leads us right into the murky waters of office exclusives. Now sure, sometimes they're about privacy for the seller, but you always have to ask, who is this really for? It is absolutely critical that sellers get the full picture on the trade-offs, like way fewer buyers seeing the house and maybe a lower final price. The choice has to be theirs, and it has to be fully informed.
And this one might be the most corrosive practice of them all, when listing agents secretly favor offers from inside their own brokerage. It can be super subtle, like maybe they're a little slow to call an outside agent back,
or they don't present a competing offer with the same excitement. But it completely undermines the whole idea of a fair and open market that the MLS was built to create.
Okay, so after digging through all that, kind of a downer, right? Let's flip the script. It's time to talk about the solution and why having integrity isn't just about being a good person, it's actually the ultimate competitive advantage. This is where the real pros shine.
Look, in the world we live in now, with information everywhere, consumers are smart. They're demanding transparency, and they expect accountability. So, the agents who build their business on a rock-solid foundation of integrity, they aren't just playing fair. They are setting themselves up for huge long-term success.
And this right here, this is the playbook for the long game. This is how you build a real career in this business. It's not about one deal. It's a powerful cycle. You act with integrity, which earns you trust. That trust gets you referrals, and those referrals build you a reputation that lasts a lifetime. That's the blueprint.
I love this visual because it makes it so clear. You've got two paths, right? One path is cutting corners. Sure, you might get a short-term win. You might close that one deal. But the other path, holding the line on ethics and trust, that's what leads to a real, lasting career. When you see it laid out like this, the choice seems pretty obvious.
All right, so we've walked through the bad and we've walked through the good. What's the bottom line? What's the one thing we should all walk away with, whether we're a consumer or an agent?
And this quote really says it all. The market is watching. Your clients are watching. And at the end of the day, whether you're buying, selling, or building a business, trust is the only currency that really matters. So you've got to make sure what they see is worth trusting.